All right, Gerry Arens, here we go. It's all yours.
Okay. Start the slideshow from the beginning, and it's not working.
So go up to the top left.
Yeah.
Over there on the top
should,
left, it says start slideshow from beginning.
That's where I am.
Click that one.
There it goes.
There we go. All right.
Okay. All right. This is the route that, hey, wait a minute. I got to get rid of these people because they're right across my screen. How do I get rid of these? I can't see what I'm.
View speaker.
Hold on a second. Gerry, don't worry about it because that's not what's being broadcast. That's just what you're seeing on your screen, okay?
Okay, well, I don't want to see that because it's on top of what I'm trying to explain.
Yeah.
Okay, so where all the people are at the very top, there are four little icons, a little line, a small line, two lines, and a matrix. Click the small line.
They're gone. Okay, good. Okay, we started out from Dallas in this trip. We went westward, Carlsbad. We spent our first night, and you can follow the route around from that point. We went to Las Cruces, spent a night there. Through Tucson, we went up to Scottsdale, spent a night there. Sedona, 2 nights there. We did not spend the nights in the Grand Canyon. We spent them in a town called Williams. From there, we went up to Santa Fe, spent 2 nights there. And from there, we drove back to Dallas, but that's the route of our bus trip, okay? These are the people that we had on there. We're supposed to be 25. We only ended up with 15. If you count them, there are only 13 on here. The 2 people did not show. Anyhow, so this was a very small group. We started in Carlsbad Tavern here. And several of us, as I say, we went outside. We had the ones that went down the elevator just stayed inside the building, went down the elevator, but most of us went down and through. So we had to go to this little site here and have the drawbacks of walking outside. We could have quit here, but we didn't. I went down. I was wishing I hadn't after a while. So this is what it looked like as we started here. You go down, you just keep winding down the paths here. And this is, you can see here now the path. This is the first time we see actually the cavern from the outside. You can see more paths here. When you get down, all at once you realize you no longer see daylight. And so I shot a picture of that back. I've got several shots here now of what I saw on the way down and what we saw once we got to the bottom. I'm just going to zip through these here because we're way behind. And so, but you can look now when we got to the bottom.
Go ahead and take your time, Gerry, no problem.
Okay. All right. When we got to the bottom, we actually dropped down 700 feet. And this kind of shows here's the start. And we actually go away from the cavern. And then we come back to it. Well, all these zigzags here, when we see these, we're right on the edge of the precipice. And I have vertigo, and I had a real hard time here because there's a guardrail, but you're walking in the dark many times, and you're walking on a very steep incline at places. So this was, for anybody that has vertigo and goes to Carlsbad, I suggest not doing this, but riding down on the elevator because you don't have to experience this. Plus, by the time you get to the bottom, your legs are about ready to fall off. So had we ridden down on the elevator, we'd have come here and we'd have walked around this. Well, our legs were so sore that the 2 of us just got this far. We turned around and went back to the elevator, but we missed the bulk of the caverns here. So this is really what you want to see is this stuff down here, not the walk down to the bottom. So that's my advice. Anybody that goes there and has got a little weak legs or got vertigo, get on that elevator and take that down, okay? So here, once we got to the bottom, these were some of the views that I saw in just that very short distance. So I'm still gonna kind of flip through these because they're beautiful, but it's still not the experience that you get when you're actually down there because you lose the effect of the openness and the spaciousness of this place. So, but anyhow, here are the few of the scenes that we did see. And when you are down in the bottom, there's guardrails all along the edge. Plus, it's very even walking. I mean, you don't have this real steep incline. As I'm told, there were a couple of steep inclines, but it was nothing that no one could manage because the rest of them got around just fine.
So Jerry, so you're looking at this, so about how far is it like across that? Is that like, 30 feet, 100 feet? What do you think?
In places you can see 100 yards.
Wow.
Yeah, not this particular one. This is probably 30 yards across there.
Oh, that's, yes, yes.
Yeah, it's like this, for instance, this is a long from here to here. This might be 100 yards across there. I have no idea because it's hard to get a feeling for the depth of things in there. Anyhow, but let me get out of here. We came out of the Carlsbad area. I just make one more comment. When we drove in the Carlsbad Caverns itself, we drove this little canyon, and as we were driving, I didn't have my camera out, but on the other wall was this big cave, just almost on a vertical cliff. Okay, there's the cave. When we came out, there were 3 bighorn sheep standing right next to that cave, and I could easily have gotten those pictures or those animals in on my picture with my camera and a zoom lens. I could have easily got those beautiful sheep. So I missed that opportunity. Someone looked at this when I was presenting it, and they said, "What are those blue lights on the side of that cliff? Are those UFOs?" And I looked and I said, "No, those are reflections of the lights that were in the inside of the bus." Okay. So, but it was a legitimate question because you're in the state of New Mexico. We reached Las Cruces. That was our second night where we stayed over someplace. And this is Highway 10 off into the distance. And so Highway 10, of course, stretches all the way from Arizona all the way to Florida. So anyhow, so now this was the official warning that we were in Arizona. The Roadrunner is their state bird, and of course, this is just a statue on the top of a bluff that we passed. And as we got to Tucson is famous for a few things. One of which is the fact that it's an airline graveyard. So what you see over here, distance, are airlines that are ready to be chopped up into small pieces of aluminum. So, and there are many, many airlines, some from airlines, I suppose, around the country, maybe even around the world. But anyhow, so we got then to Taliesin. We really didn't spend any time in Tucson. We got to Scottsdale, and so we had some time to kill in Scottsdale. We went to a place called Taliesin West, and that's a site that Frank Lloyd Wright had established. He established a school there. But on the outside, we actually didn't get to go in because we only had a little bit of time, and the tickets were $40 a piece. And so we opted not to go into the place. We just walked around the outside. There were sculptures all over the grounds there of things that the students had created. So I just included a few of these. They're very ornate, very detailed, and very mysterious. You don't know what the heck they're trying to represent by these things. Anyhow, so I'll just include a few of them. Beautiful sculptures. You can see they all have a patina on them. They were probably copper at one time, or raw copper, and they've got this patina on. We went to a site then in Scottsdale, and if any people ever get to Scottsdale, I'm going to strongly suggest you go to this museum. It's one of the best museums I've ever been in. Outside are statues. There are many more on the inside, but these are just a few of them on the outside of that building. No titles. I guess there are titles to them. the credits given to the sculptor and that kind of thing, but it's wasn't able to get the titles on them. At any rate, there is a whole room devoted to pictures that Barry Goldwater had taken while he was senator, I would suppose. Anyhow, there's a whole room devoted to it, and he was really a great black and photographer. Everything was black and white that was in there. So I just included a few of those. If I wait long enough here, maybe can read some of these. So I took pictures of pictures is what I did here. These should be beautiful in color, but they're beautiful in black and white too. Then I included just a few of the statues that are inside of the museum itself. But the detail on these is striking and beautiful. It's the Museum of the American West, and what they're showing for the most part is the Native Americans that were here. The statue was outside. And I know I've seen this one before elsewhere. It's a man that's scouting for deer, and of course the deer is walking right underneath him. Deer are known to do that. They're very sneaky animals. Oil painting, beautiful. This was probably a scene quite often before the white man got here, when there were plenty of buffalo, and they had to eat too. From Scottsdale, then we headed to Sedona, spent 2 nights. We stayed at a gambling. We were supposed to stay at I won't get into that. We were supposed to stay at a much better place, but this gambling casino was one of the nicest places that we stayed at of all the places that we were at. And talk about good food, they had it there. So this is a sign that you see when you enter the Sedona area. Got just a few pictures of what we saw there. And I tell you what, when you get pictures of the red rock, you want to make sure that the sun is shining on them, because if the sun is not shining on, they don't look anything like this. They'll look more like this, which is okay, but the colors don't appear unless you got the sun shining directly on them. And so all these pictures, of course, were taken out the window of the bus. Everything on the foreground is blurred. Everything is not. That's far away. There's one picture coming up that I want to point out something to you. I don't see any, in this particular one, I don't see any pedestrians. Those are rocks up there for the most part. But on this particular picture, if you look, you see pedestrians here. You got 2 here, there's 1 here. There are a few over here, but if we zoom in, there's a guy way up near the top of this thing, and it's quite steep up there, and I'm sure he knows what he's doing, but there's a way up there. This Chapel of the Holy Cross is famous, and of course we're in a bus. You notice there are a couple cars here. Well, the road that leads up to this place is wide enough for cars. There was no way that the bus, if the bus did get back there, you'd not be able to turn around. There just is not any room. So, but this is a very famous chapel. It's not designed, or it's not supported by any one religion. It's just a chapel that a person decided to create, and it's been there for many, many years, probably 75 years, I would guess. We went into the town of Sedona. This is and did a walk around tour just on our own. And so this is a chapel that we passed, very small chapel. These were some doors that were outside. They're no longer, well, they're still in hinges, but it looked like, I'm not really sure if these were used or not, but they're very old doors. They're very, very gracefully carved. This man was playing this instrument here. I'm just going to zoom in. Has anybody seen an instrument like this? The thing has got 12 strings. And we stood there and listened to him for a short time, but I'd never seen a guitar quite like that. It's hooked up to an amplifier. We can see that.
It's called a harp guitar.
It's a what?
A harp guitar.
Okay, okay,
I've heard it one time.
okay. I'll take your word for it. Of course, when you're in Sedona, you see all kinds of these pink vehicles. This one was, I thought, very interesting here, but you notice there's some sliding doors here. In case there is a little bit of rain, they can cover everybody up and they don't get wet. Now, very close casino that we were staying in is this Montezuma's Castle. It's only about 2 miles away. It's a very famous Native American dwelling from, what do they figure, around 1200, I think is what they said, where it dates back to. I did see a show on television just recently, and this was the highlight of that particular film. But people used to be able to go up on this, and apparently they had people maybe fell off or were causing damage to the place. At any rate, they discontinued letting people go in. So what they did instead, the museum, they exhibit this, and so this is what actually it looks like on the inside, but of course this is just a mock-up of it. And at any rate, so that's inside the museum. And here's I've got a little show showing you how this fits into that hillside. And so there's not only this, there's also a walking path where you can spend a lot of time. There's some very interesting artifacts along the bottom of this. Next thing that we saw then was Montezuma's Well, and that's about only probably less than a mile away from maybe a little bit more than that. At any rate, it's very close to Montezuma's Castle, and so we went to see this next. And the rangers gave us a tour or a little explanation of what we're going to see in the walking tour. So this is a panorama then of what we see from the first time you enter that place. There's a dwelling there.
Oh,
Yes. Yes, my friend.
There's a little lake at the bottom of this.
You know me, I usually don't like to have my picture taken.
And that's what they call Montezuma's Well, is this water here. And this is constantly refilling. There's a spring in the bottom, and they anticipate that there's 1,000 gallons per minute coming up from the bottom of this. There's also an outlet over here on this end right over here. And the water is running out of that thing at 1,000 gallons a minute. So it's perfect equilibrium. So at any rate, I just made this comment here. This was a dwelling here that probably dates back to the time of Montezuma's Castle as well. So you can walk down into this place here. Here's a stairwell starting here, winds down here. And because I've got vertigo, I did not feel like walking down there. There are no handrails, and it's steep in places and no handrails. And if you happen to fall down there, somebody would have to carry you back out. That would be a tedious problem for somebody. Our leader is standing there telling me, come on down, come on down. I said, no way, Jose. You can walk down there at your own risk. So at any rate, we left in Sedona and then headed up toward the Grand Canyon. We, of course, I said we didn't spend the 2 nights in the Grand Canyon. We spent them in the town of Williams. Williams was a very interesting town, and if you get out that direction, you should spend a night there at any rate. Williams was the last town that was bypassed by I-40. So it was the last, one of the last towns to not see Route 66 go through it. So I'll show you a few more pictures of what we saw in Williams when we went back, but we did take off then for the Grand Canyon. Unfortunately, we were only able to spend a few hours there because we didn't stay at the lodge. We stayed off-site. So I'll just show you a little bit of what we saw. Here's a kind of a panorama just from that same spot, just showing what was actually out there, and the colors at that time of the day, the colors did not show up here on the canyon. I guess the sun angle just wasn't right for it, but so that was a panorama from that first site. And there were a lot of shadows. If you look here, you can see that, you know, the colors are just not there, and a lot of shadows. So and I think it was 1989. And at the time, I don't recall these fences being around the outside because my son was with me. And a little shit walked right to the edge of that, stood there and looked over the edge, scared the hell out of me. I would never do that, but he had the gall to go ahead and do that. So just a couple more pictures of the canyon itself. These are normally really a bright red. Here they just kind of show up as a dull brown. That is what you call a raven. If you've never heard a raven, that's what they sound like. So then after we left Grand Canyon, headed back to Williams, I just happened to be looking at the window off in the distance, and I saw this. There's a whole herd of elk. These are several hundred yards off the road. And I didn't even bother to count them, but showed that to somebody and said, well, you notice there are no bull elk in here, that's strictly cows. Cows are all traveling as a group. Back in Williams, then I included just a few pictures. There were several old cars in this town. I believe that's around a 55, 56 Buick. That's a 98 Oldsmobile from the mid-50s also. It's got the wraparound windshield. Then there was a newly opened car museum, which we saw at night. And so this is just a few of the cars that they had there. Now that is what you call a Woody. That's a Woody station wagon. Genuine wood. You saw all kinds of these out there because these are what the thrill seekers ride nowadays. So we left Williams then and headed for Santa Fe, which was kind of a pretty drive, I guess you'd call it. So we saw a lot of this scenery like this. There were bluffs that we passed that were very close to the road, just mile after mile of bluffs like this. We passed this one, there were 3 crosses on it. Not sure exactly what these represented. I assume they're crosses of Calvary though. So then after we passed that site just a short distance, we noticed that the bluffs started getting further and further away. We passed this and all of a sudden they might have been 10 miles away. We were just in the bottom of this flat valley. So we drove through that, then through Albuquerque and up to Santa Fe. We got there late in the day, so we just did a short walk through the town that first night. We came across this symbol on the wall. I'm not quite sure what this is, what it represents. You see, there looks like a monk here. It's got a head of a cow. It's got wings on it, and it also, you notice that somebody has tried to erase this thing. They're torn off here. The wings are broken off. So I got a hunch that it might be a satanic symbol, and so somebody didn't want it there. They were trying to get rid of it. The Loretto Chapel is one of the older buildings in the city. We did go inside of that. Inside of this is what's famous, makes this particularly famous. In fact, in addition to being a very old place, there's a spiral staircase, and no one knows how it was built because there are no supports for it. They don't know how it's being held up. But it goes from the floor, it goes all the way up to the top. When you get to the top, there is a loft up there. It looks like there's a loft that all, I mean, there's also a stairwell then that goes up and probably to a bell tower or something. At any rate, this is the altar and the balcony there. This is also the oldest church in the United States. It was built around 1610. This is also the beginning of the Santa Fe Trail. I'd heard of the Santa Fe Trail, never really paid much attention to it, but it actually went from Santa Fe into the middle of the state of Missouri. Franklin, Missouri is where it ended. And of course, that was a stage ride, I guess. People, that was a way for people to get easily from that part of Missouri to, didn't take you, of course, to the West Coast. It just took you as far as Santa Fe. But it was a famous trail. This is the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi. We had the misfortune of being there on a holiday, so we did not get to go into any of the churches or shrines. This church did not have the steeples completed on it, so there are two steeples that end right there. Okay, and we were there in October. And when we left, the trees in Texas were all completely green. And we got out there and there's this beautiful tree that was going through the change of seasons. Got to remember now, Santa Fe, Albuquerque are very high elevations, so they get cooler temperatures than we do earlier in the wintertime. This is a museum that we passed, and I took a picture of this. It was kind of an interesting picture. Later on, it was one of the few things that were open, and we did get to go into the museum. This was the little bit of history. The Spanish controlled what became the state of New Mexico, and this was their capital in that particular part of the country. So this is one end of it. The other end is this. Well, when it was taken over by the United States, this became the original capital of the state of New Mexico. So from the Spanish as their capital, it went to the United States as their capital. And while I was sitting I was waiting for she was someplace doing something. And this fellow next to me said, "Hey," he said, "you saw the state capitol?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, did you happen to notice the columns?" "Yes, I noticed the columns." He said, "Well, a couple of years ago, this young man and his hot rod came roaring down the street, and he had too much to drink and he lost control. He hit the side of this building. He also hit the first three poles here and demolished the first three poles with his car." Well, dilemma. What do we do? How do we replace this? Well, they did find three poles that pretty close to matched what had been there, and they did put those up. So they replaced that. I don't know who paid for it, whether the insurance company did or who, but they put up this barrier here then to keep cars from driving down this particular street. So it's a little bit of history of what went on. I put this slide in because I thought it was the church that was in Taos. Here it's an art gallery, it's not a church. We had lunch, not in this balcony, we had one that was perpendicular to this balcony, but sites like this were just loaded with people. You had to sign up to get into the places, but it's very pleasant eating out there. Now, this is the interior of that museum, and these are sculptures from Australia. and they're there because Australia also has what they call Aborigines, and these were native Australian people. So they brought some of the artwork that were in one of the Aborigine museums there. They brought those over here to this particular museum because it kind of fit together with them. I included this little I'm told that boy was either 10 or 12 years old. This is supposedly the most photographed place in all of New Mexico. This is just an inn. And this is where we were supposed to have stayed in our stay in Santa Fe. And instead we ended up staying at probably a 3-star motel in the outskirts of town. Would love to have stayed at this place. And I just made a comment. This is from the Santa Fe Railroad. It's something that you don't see on trains anymore. Cabooses are a thing of the past. They were used on freight trains, of course. And at any rate, we're almost to the end of our show here. We got to Amarillo, and this is a famous site. It's west of Amarillo. The bus stopped, and I didn't walk out there. I just did not feel like walking out there. But when you step off the bus, there's a table there, and you can a can of spray paint or many cans as you want, and you can go out there and you can spray paint on these cars. And these are all Cadillacs. Some of them are missing tires, but at any rate, people walk out there and spray paint these things. Looks like they also have a table out there. I didn't notice that before, but so that person there might be spray painting. But at any rate, we then headed into Amarillo. Amarillo's got a restaurant that's famous. They have a restaurant there that serves a 72-ounce steak. And I don't know what you pay. I think you pay $10 to enter it. But at any rate, if you can eat that 72-ounce steak, you do not have to pay for it. And that steak is very expensive. So, but they just pay the entry fee, and then they try to do that. There have only been a few people that have actually eaten that steak. And one of the people that has eaten it is a lady who weighed about 135 pounds. They said she finished it off and asked for another one. Can you believe that? At any rate, that's the end of our tour, because when we left Amarillo, Western Texas has nothing to look at as far as scenery. The towns are very small that you drive through. Many of them are on the edge of dying away. And when we finally got to Dallas, it was around 10 o'clock in the evening. And none of us were in the mood to do any more picture taking. So that then is the end of my presentation. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Gerry.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
So-
Gerry.
So a couple of comments I had, and then I'm going to open it up. So one of the things when Paul and I went to the Grand Canyon, one of the things that the ranger told us is that every one of those layers that you see in the rocks is the remnants of a compressed seabed.
Okay.
There would be because that part of the North American continent would be underwater, and then the water would go away and the sand would compress, and then there would be another sea and it would go out. There are 23 layers of compressed oceans in the Grand Canyon that they can count of, each of which was like, millions of years of making. So that's always something that's amazing to me, is just that timeline.
Jerry, I was just in the Chapel of the Holy Cross on Monday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we just came back from Sedona, and the interior has the crucifix that is literally as big as a church almost. The chapel itself, there's very limited seating in, probably no more than say 30. But it is it's a shame you couldn't go in.
Right.
It was extremely impressive.
Yeah, I wanted to go in, but there was no bus was going to get in there, and it's a long walk if you walk in from the road. So
Yeah, it is. It was a long walk. We were the first people in on Monday morning. But you were right about the red rocks needing to take pictures with the sun shining on it. But we had one of those red rocks right in front of our breakfast window, and just to watch the sun reflect as it came up, and then as it filled the whole rock, and the same thing in the evening.
Yeah.
So very, very impressive. And thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting.
It
You're
was,
welcome.
thank you.
You're welcome. So I don't know how many people are still around to see it. We had a little problem here with our monitor from, that was the problem. Wasn't our computers, it was the monitor. So,
Oh, we all hung around.
We hung around.
Yeah,
I'm
we
gonna say
and
goodbye.
chatted, and it was very nice. We chatted and waited, and it wasn't really a big problem at all.
What tour company did you go with, Jerry?
A friend of mine arranged the trip, and I don't know who he used. I could find out for you if you really
Oh,
wanted.
that's okay.
Yeah, what happened, it was a 45 passenger bus. It had, of course, its toilet on it, which was nice because we never had to stop. But he was supposed to get 25 people to go on this bus, and he got 15. Well, 2 weeks before the trip, the tour company called them and said, "Hey, we need a lot more money to finish this thing, or either that or you can cancel." Well, he had all the deposits from these people, and he really wanted to do the trip because the city of Albuquerque was very meaningful to him, and he wanted to complete the trip. And so what he did, he made the arrangements then for all the motel places. So instead of having, an upper grade motel, we ended up staying in probably, instead of 4 or 5 stars, we ended up staying in probably 3 stars, 2 to 3 stars. So that's how he ended up covering the difference in it. And then some of the things that we were supposed to see, we didn't. Well, the biggest one was that we were supposed to spend 2 nights out at the Grand Canyon. And then had we done that, we'd have had all kinds of time to walk around. Well, we ended up spending maybe 3 hours at the most. That's the most that we got to walk around and see the Grand Canyon. So it was kind of a bummer from that standpoint. The city of Williams was an interesting place to go, though, as an alternative, but that didn't measure up to the Grand Canyon, of course. So from that standpoint, that was a bummer.
When we went to the Grand Canyon, we went through in a helicopter.
You went in a helicopter?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Have you had a
Las
chance
Vegas?
been to the Palo Duro Canyon?
I'm sorry, are you talking to me?
Yeah, well, has anybody here been to the Palo Duro Canyon in West Texas?
Yeah, I went there. We went there many, many years ago.
It's just astounding because you're going across this West Texas, and we all know what that's like. And it's just a sudden drop down, and it's not advertised much at all, and it's really actually a very nice place. They call it the small Grand Canyon, and it's a canyon, and you can stay down in it in CCC built buildings And it's a state park. It's a Texas state park. Have you been there, Beth?
You want to unmute yourself,
Can't hear
Beth?
you, Beth, you're muted.
You're muted, Beth.
Hill,
Almost.
You're nearly there.
Beth,
She's coming.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we were there and we've been trying to hit a lot of the state parks and that's the one we did. And I think that's fairly close to that Antelope Canyon one.
yes.
And we didn't know what that was. And we're just heartbroken that we drove right by that canyon and didn't go in there. It's supposed to be one of the most beautiful in the country. And, you know,
I haven't been to Antelope Canyon. I was impressed with Palajuro.
yeah, it was amazing.
I mean, it's got, it doesn't have the, you know, the mystique and all that other stuff of the Grand Canyon. But it's actually a very, very good place to go and visit, and nothing like as far away.
Yeah, someday I will get out to see Palo Duro. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Now, when you were in Williams, was that where they had the train that you could take to the Grand Canyon?
Yes, it
And
is.
then they had that, I don't know, what do they have, like a holdup on the train or something? Because I'm sure that's what we did one time.
Yeah.
Way back when I was working at, we took a extra couple days. Because we used to go to Tucson all the time for some computer training. And I thought, you know, we got held up by a train, by robbers, but I thought we came out of Williams.
You did. You did.
We did. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that's where that was.
Yeah.
You got held up by robbers?
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
Reenacted.
reenacted.
Oh, okay.
And I can remember they gave us ice cold bottles, glass bottles of Coke on the train. And it was such a hit because it must have been, you know, we were hot and everything else. Because I remember I got pulled out of the train by these robbers and I don't know what all that.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the conversation. I mean, the recording, but we can continue talking. So